On November 30th, 1984, Candace Dirksen was on her way home from school. When she failed to show up at the expected time, her mother, Wilma Dirksen, got the two younger children into the car. After driving down the street looking for her daughter, Wilma proceeded to the office of her husband, Cliff. Returning home, they began calling Candace's friends, their family members, and anyone else who might know where Candace was. At 10 o'clock that night, they called the police. An extensive search by the police, friends, and volunteers began. Public pleas for information were made. Posters were hung. The search continued until 7 weeks later, Candace's body was found. She had been murdered. After going to the morgue to identify Candace's body, Wilma and Cliff returned home. A stream of family members and friends came by, offering their sincere condolences and dropping off food. All their visitors had left by 10 that night. Then came a knock on the front door. Exhausted, the Dirksens opened the door to find a lone man. He introduced himself and declared that he, too, was the parent of a murdered child. This new identity, parent of a murdered child, stunned Wilma. Recognizing the man from various news accounts, Wilma and Cliff invited him in. After they had seated themselves at the kitchen table, he began recounting what had happened to his daughter. Wilma felt like he had told his story many times, a story he felt compelled to repeat had, in turn, become all-consuming. Wilma would later comment that he seemed stuck. After relating every detail of that horrific day, he began listing all the ways his life had changed. His health had suffered. He couldn't work, couldn't concentrate. Relationships had deteriorated. He showed them the notebooks he had filled with meticulous details of what happened during 2 trials. He ranted about the judicial system as well as the media. It seemed that instead of dwelling on precious memories of his daughter, all he had left were thoughts of her murder and the hate he felt for the man accused of killing her. For 2 hours, he spoke of a life destroyed. His. Wilma and Cliff could identify with some of what he related. The grief, anger, fear, and suspicion. But paramount was their horror. Was this to be their future? A long series of losses, lives disintegrating, culminating in the eventual loss of their own tender memories of a cherished daughter. That night, they made a decision. It would not be accomplished flawlessly, but it would serve as their guiding principle. They would respond not with loss and hate, but with forgiveness. And so, at a press conference a few days after Candace's funeral, when asked their thoughts on the person who had killed their daughter. Cliff could reply that they forgave the murderer. Wilma, who felt she had not yet reached the place Cliff had, replied she wanted to forgive. They weren't sure yet what their forgiveness would look like, but it was important that there would be no room for anger. They had two young children who would need them more than ever. For the sake of their children, each other, and the memory of Candace, they needed a way to move forward and not become locked in a hopeless, hate-filled past. Moving forward would be complicated because there was no blueprint. They had tried to be good parents who raised normal, happy children. Then their world was blown up by a senseless act that every parent dreads, but none can prepare for. The Dirksons were in alien territory, unsure as to how to navigate. As newspaper articles noted the Dirksons' determination to forgive, the couple found themselves invited to address various groups who wanted to know how to help victims like themselves. Trained as a journalist, Wilma noticed common threads from her conversations with other parents. She started listing the myriad ways in which someone who has undergone trauma thinks they are beginning to heal, only to be pulled up short by the realization that forgiveness is a complex animal to rein in. One day, the heart will forgive, but the mind stubbornly refuses to let go. Another day, the mind will forgive, but the heart is ensnared by anger. But gradually, with daily sincere effort, both heart and mind will bend toward forgiveness and peace. For us, peace can mean different things and take on different faces depending on our situation and mindset. Peace can be accepting a painful reality as one stops struggling with what has happened or that looms in the future. What happened or is likely to can be bad enough, but our dwelling on it to the extent that we are unable to accept any occasional moments of contentment or even joy leads to our missing or rejecting that which can ease our loss, grief, and fear. We will overlook that there are still choices in our lives, which, even if they seem inconsequential or too challenging to accomplish, can ease what we are undergoing. In molding an inner life, we learned how Eddie Hillesum, a Jewess in Nazi-controlled Amsterdam, realized she had a choice. She could allow herself to surrender to fear and hatred and sink under the weight of the inevitable suffering. Or she could accept the likelihood that she would soon find herself loaded on a boxcar and along with 1,000 other Jews be deported on the next weekly train to the death camps in the East. No longer struggling, she could accept that suffering had always been with her people, with all people, and that fear made the suffering even worse. And so, instead of being overwhelmed by fear, Eddie let go of it. No longer struggling, she found joy in appreciating the fleeting moments of beauty that could be found in her remaining days. She found calmness in the internal sanctuary she retreated to through her acceptance and meditation. Hetty found peace, a peace that enabled her to, very importantly, direct her energy to helping the interned Jews still struggling with confusion, denial, fear, and abject terror. What else is peace? Transformation. It is changing a life that has been broken into one that is restored. In the first seed, we learned of Arno, a neo-Nazi skinhead who failed in his plan to shock everyone he encountered when he stood before an unfazed, elderly Black woman. Instead of being intimidated, she smiled at him. He later compared her smile to the sun, which shines impartially on everyone. In time, Arno quit being a neo-Nazi and founded a not-profit organization focused on helping people leave hate groups. He transformed himself from a hater who wanted to either terrify or infuriate others to a father who loved his young son, transformed himself from being broken into someone who was whole. The Dirksons found the motivation to transform themselves from two people overcome by loss and grief to parents who could still love their two remaining children and each other. Transformation can go two ways, downhill or up. Our direction depends on what we choose to tell ourselves. Choosing anger robs us of our chance to accept disappointment, understand why tragedy strikes, and go on to live with compassion and the wish to help others. What else is peace? Forgiveness. Forgiveness is a gift capable of creating harmony in one's life. It is a state of mind that results from focusing on a compassionate present and a hopeful future, rather than being stuck in a desperate past. In dropping the luggage of hate, we learned that police officer Stephen McDonald was shot. He spent his remaining years in a wheelchair, only able to breathe with a ventilator. But instead of raging against the boy who had tried to kill him, Stephen relinquished bitterness and accepted the reality of the situation. He decided not to add spiritual injuries to his physical ones. Picking love for his wife and son, he chose the ongoing work of forgiveness, which arose mainly from understanding. His attacker, Shavad, had seen Stephen not as a human being, but as the enemy. a symbol of a system that seemed designed to subjugate Shabbat and deny him any chance of a good life. A symbol to be hated and killed. Stephen understood this, and with such understanding and forgiveness, found peace. When undergoing adversity, we do not want to allow the rest of our life to be dictated by what we underwent. Understanding the circumstances that led to a situation, we too can see that we are not the only one who has suffered. There are reasons the other person did what they did. They likely felt that their actions were justified, just like we think ours are. Also, we can understand that a karmic relationship has led to repeated situations in which we have been both the victim and the perpetrator. Unless one of us realizes this, lets go of bitterness, and stops reacting as we always have, the situation will worsen as we continue holding and nurturing the hate in our hearts. Or perhaps our understanding can arise from our realization that clinging to thoughts of hatred and revenge will consume us, as it did the man who called on the Dirksons. He introduced himself as the parent of a murdered child. Then for 2 hours, he related all he had lost since his daughter's death. He spoke of his hatred for the man he was convinced was the murderer, the evil man who had destroyed his life as well. The Dirksons, sensing the darkness that the man's life had been reduced to, decided that they somehow had to forgive the person, whoever they were, who had killed Candace. Failing to do so, they would risk allowing hatred and revenge to lead them into that same darkness. For most of us, forgiveness is complex and arduous, something that takes ongoing effort and endless reminders to ourselves to let go of pain and anger. Getting the mind and the heart to the same point at the same time and holding them there takes much work. But the reward for repairing what was deemed hopeless and broke makes the effort eminently worthwhile, as is the result of finding peace. To find peace is to find a mind that recognizes fury as a weapon whose ultimate target is oneself. It is the heart that knows the tranquility of having relinquished expectations and disappointment, and the spirit that has begun to heal. Peace is reality accepted, freedom from oppressive thoughts, release from hurtful emotions, and harmony in interacting with others. Peace is the absence of distress and the presence of equanimity. Peace is the mind, spirit, and heart simultaneously in repose. Amitabha.